Some stories begin with a hero charging into battle. This one begins with a tired king, 300 years old, quietly trying to remember what it feels like to be human. The castle was quieter at night than the villagers ever imagined. No screams, no chains, only the soft hum of candle flames and the distant sigh of the wind against black stone. In the great hall, where portraits of long-dead royals watched from the walls, the vampire king sat alone on his throne of carved obsidian, listening to the echo of his own stillness. His name was Aurelius, but no one dared to use it. They called him Your Majesty, or when they thought he could not hear, the Crimson Shadow. To the world, he was a monster wrapped in velvet and gold. To himself, he was simply a man who had lived too long and lost too much. Tonight, the scent of fear did not fill the air. Instead, there was the quiet rustle of skirts, the nervous clink of a silver tray. A young maid crossed the marble floor with small, careful steps, her eyes lowered, her hands trembling just enough for him to notice. Behind her, half hidden by the tray, walked a little girl wearing a dress one size too big and an apron too clean to match the worn shoes on her feet. Aurelius watched them with the same detached calm he had trained into himself over a century. Servants came and went. Lives burned bright and brief around him like sparks from a fire. He had learned not to look too closely, not to ask their names. Names made memories, and memories hurt. The maid reached the foot of the throne and lowered herself in a clumsy curtsy. The girl tried to copy her and nearly dropped the candle she was carrying. Wax splashed over her small hand, and the child gasped, flinching. The flame trembled, then steadied. "She is new," the maid said quietly, her voice shaking. "My daughter, Leora, Your Majesty, the staff is small these days. I thought, if she learns early, she will not be afraid." Aurelius almost answered with the cold words that came so easily. "Children do not belong in a king's hall, especially not in mine." But the girl lifted her head at that moment, and he met her eyes. They were not the eyes of someone who had learned to hate him from stories. They were wide, soft, curious. She stared up at him the way children sometimes stared at the stars, half in wonder, half in question, as if trying to understand why they were so far away. "You are the king," she said softly, as if testing the truth of it out loud. The hall seemed to grow quieter. A few servants at the edges of the room froze in place. No one spoke to him like that. No one had in a very long time. "I am," Aurelius replied, his voice low, the old royal weight in it. "And you are too small to be carrying fire in my hall." "It's not heavy," she whispered, determined. "Mama says I must be useful. Useful people get to stay." Something inside him shifted at those words. A faint, uncomfortable ache where his heart used to beat. He knew exactly what it meant to hold on to a place, to prove over and over that you were worth the space you occupied in someone else's world. As the girl stepped closer, the candlelight brushed over his pale face, his sharp cheekbones, the red glint in his eyes. She did not shrink away. She studied him with the seriousness of a child trying to memorize a story she will tell again and again. Then the wax burned too low. Hot liquid spilled over her fingers. She bit her lips, refusing to cry out, but the tray knocked against the stone arm of the throne, and the candle fell. Aurelius moved faster than the servants could see. The flame died between his bare fingers before it touched the girl's skin, but not before a thin line of heat kissed her forearm. She yelped, pulling back, and the sleeve of her dress tore open with a soft, ripping sound. The hall suddenly filled with a strange, sharp light. Across the child's pale skin, glowing like embers drawn in living flesh, a symbol burned awake, a crimson mark in the shape of a rising sun wrapped in thorns. It pulsed once, twice, as if answering some silent call. Every vampire in the room went utterly still. Aurelius did not breathe. He knew that mark. He had worn it once himself, centuries ago, when he was still learning what it meant to be bound by blood. It was the seal of kinship, an ancient sign older than any crown on his head. It appeared only when a bloodline, thought lost to the world, returned. The girl stared at her arm, stunned. "Mama, what is it?" Her voice quivered between fear and wonder. The maid dropped to her knees, the tray clattering forgotten to the floor. Her face had gone completely white. "No," she whispered. "No, this is not possible." From the shadows, an old advisor stepped forward, his own eyes wide. "My king," he breathed, "that mark can belong only to your house, to your blood." The air grew heavier, as if the stone walls themselves were leaning in to listen. Aurelius reached out, not as a ruler, but as something far more fragile, a man standing at the edge of a truth he had never dared to hope for. "Child," he said quietly, his voice suddenly rough, "who is your father?" The maid shook her head quickly, tears already spilling. "She has no father, your majesty, not one she knows. Please, I beg you, she has done nothing wrong." But the mark on the girl's arm flared brighter at his nearness, answering his presence like a heartbeat finding its echo. The light painted his pale fingers red, as if reminding him of promises he had made long ago, promises about never letting his bloodline be cursed with the same loneliness that had eaten him alive. For the first time in 100 years, Aurelius felt fear, not of death, not of enemies, but of hope, of what it would mean if this child truly belonged to him, if fate was dragging him back into a kind of love he had sworn he could not afford. He knelt before Leora, the mighty vampire king, lowering himself to the cold floor until his eyes were level with hers. The court watched, stunned, as their immortal ruler looked at a maid's child as if she were more dangerous than any hunter's blade. The girl swallowed hard, her small arm trembling in his hand. "Did I do something bad?" she whispered. Aurelius opened his mouth to answer, but the words would not come. The mark between them burned softly, binding, waking, remembering. Far above them, hidden behind clouds, dawn began to think about rising. And in that suspended breath, with the entire kingdom's fate quietly shifting around a single frightened child, the vampire king realized something that shook him more than any battle ever had. Whatever this mark meant, his life would never be the same again. He tightened his gently shaking fingers around her arm, lifted his gaze to the maid, and in a voice low and unsteady, spoke the words that would change all of their destinies. "Tell me," he said, "everything you have tried to hide from me about this child." The maid's lips parted, her secret caught between terror and love. And before she could answer, the great doors of the hall swung open with a thunderous crack, as if the castle itself refused to let the truth stay silent any longer. The sound of the doors crashing open rolled through the hall like thunder, scattering whispers and courage alike. Cold night air swept in, snuffing out several candles and bending the remaining flames until shadows shivered over stone and silk. Aurelius rose slowly from his knees, placing himself just half a step in front of Leora and her mother. It was a small movement, so subtle most would miss it, but not the child. She felt the shift, the way his tall frame suddenly became a wall between her and the unknown, and her small hand instinctively clutched the back of his cloak. A group of guards hurried inside, their armor rattling, their faces pale. At their head strode Captain Darian, broad-shouldered, loyal since almost the beginning of Aurelius's reign. He stopped halfway down the hall, eyes locked on the glowing mark on the girl's arm. For a long, heavy second, no one dared breathe. "Your Majesty," Darian said at last, his voice tight, "the wards around the outer walls, they flared red. Old magic, the kind we have not seen since," his gaze flicked to the mark again, "since your family still walked these halls." Murmurs rippled among the scattered servants. Aurelius felt the castle press in around him, like a living thing remembering the past. The portraits on the walls, his ancestors, his lost siblings, the child he had once been, seemed to watch him more closely now. "Silence," he ordered softly. The word wasn't shouted, but it carried through the hall with the force of a storm. The whispers died. Even the candles seemed to stand at attention. He turned back to the maid. She was still kneeling, arms folded tightly around herself as if trying to hold in the truth. Tears glistened on her cheeks, but her spine, he noticed, was straight. Fear lived in her eyes, but so did something else. An iron determination, the kind that only grows in people who have had to survive more than they were built for. "Rise," Aurelia said. "You will not beg on your knees while speaking of my blood." The maid's head jerked up in disbelief. Leora blinked, looking between her mother and the king, not understanding why everyone suddenly seemed smaller than the man they had all feared for so long. "Your Majesty," the advisor whispered, horrified. If the child is truly. If the child is what she appears to be, Aurelius cut in, then no one will speak of her as if she were a mistake. His own words surprised him. They came from somewhere deep, from a version of himself he had buried under layers of distance and duty. He felt Leora's fingers still fisted in his cloak. She was shaking, but she had not let go. He looked down at her. "Leora," he said quietly, tasting her name for the first time, "does your arm hurt?" "A little," she admitted, voice small but honest. "But it's warm, like when Mama holds my hand to keep it from getting cold." The mark pulsed faintly as she spoke, a gentle red glow against her skin. Aurelius's chest tightened. Darian shifted uneasily. "My king, if the ancient seal has awakened, the other clans will sense it. Old oaths may be called upon. There will be questions, challenges." "Let them question," Aurelius replied, his tone turning colder, more familiar. This, at least, he understood: threats, politics, power. No one will touch her. The maid swallowed hard. "Please, your majesty, you must understand," she burst out, voice cracking. "I never meant to deceive you. I did not even know until tonight. I only suspected, and I was afraid." Aurelius faced her fully. Suspected what? She hesitated, glancing at the watching guards and servants. Shame fought with fear on her face, but something stronger won. Love, raw and simple, for the little girl clinging to the king's cloak. "Speak," Aurelius said more gently. "No one in this hall will harm you while you tell the truth. That is my word." The maid took a slow breath, steadying herself. "My name is Alara," she began, as if giving her name would make the rest easier. "Years ago, before Leora was born, there was a night when the village was attacked. Not by you, not by your kind, by hunters who came to burn the castle and anything connected to it. We ran, we hid. I was cornered near the old bridge." Her eyes flicked to Aurelius, and for a heartbeat he saw a much younger woman reflected there, soaked in rain and terror. "A stranger saved me," she continued softly. "A man with eyes like yours, but not so cold. He fought them off without killing them. He said he had sworn never again to spill blood that way." She swallowed. "He was kind to me, gentle. He spoke your name with respect, said he had once called you brother." The word struck like a thrown blade. The hall disappeared for Aurelius. For a moment it was only the echo of a name he had not allowed anyone to say in 100 years. His brother, the one who had vanished, the one he had believed dead by his own mistake. "Elian," he whispered before he could stop himself. Alara's eyes filled with tears of both fear and relief. "Yes," she breathed. "He said not to speak his name aloud within these walls. He stayed only until dawn. When he left, I did not know I carried a part of him inside me." Aurelius's mind raced. Elian alive. Elian hiding among humans, refusing to spill blood. A child born in secret, bearing the mark of their ancient line. Leora. He had lost his brother in a war he never wanted, watched his family fall one by one to hatred and fear. He had built his throne on top of that grief and sworn never to hope again. And yet hope stood trembling behind him, no taller than his waist, with his brother's blood glowing on her skin. "Why did you never come to me?" he asked quietly. There was no anger in the question, only something heavier. "If you believed she was his." Alara's shoulders shook. "Because every story I heard about you was full of blood and shadow," she said. "Because people disappear in this castle and never come back. Because I was afraid that if you knew what she was, you would take her and turn her into a weapon. Or worse, that you would see her as proof of a betrayal and destroy us both." Leora pressed her forehead into the back of Aurelius's cloak, hiding. Her muffled voice came through the fabric. "Mama thought you were a monster," she whispered, not realizing how loud she was. "But you caught the fire so it wouldn't hurt me." The hall went utterly still. Aurelius closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, feeling the strange, fierce sting of those words. Monster, protector. He had been called the first all his life, the second never to his face. He turned slightly enough to look down at her. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "the world calls someone a monster because it is afraid of what it does not understand, and sometimes that someone begins to believe it." Their eyes met, his centuries deep and tired, hers bright and fragile and yet somehow unafraid of him. "Do you believe it?" she asked. The question cut straight through the titles, the legends, the armor of distance he had worn for so long. No courtier would have dared ask. No warrior would have cared to know. But this child did. He opened his mouth, and for one terrifying instant he did not know the answer. Darian stepped forward, tension thick in his shoulders. "My king, whatever this child is, she will bring danger. The clans will smell the bloodline. The hunters will follow the light of that mark. If she is your niece, you must decide now. Hide her, claim her, or send her away before." "Enough," Aurelius said, but there was no rage in it now, only iron. He looked at Leora, at the way she gripped his cloak like it anchored her to the world, at Alara's desperate, pleading eyes. He knew exactly what fear would advise. He had listened to it for 100 years, letting it turn love into weakness and isolation into safety. Fear would say, send them away. Deny the blood, protect your throne, not your heart. But looking at the girl, at the tiny echo of his brother's smile hiding in the corner of her mouth, he understood something brutal and clear. If he chose fear now, he would lose the last living piece of his family. And this time, it would be by his own hand. He drew a breath that seemed to scrape through every year he had lived. "Leora," he said, voice low, "the mark on your arm, it means you are part of my family. Not by choice, not by law, by blood." Her lips parted. "So you're like an uncle." The word was too small for what it did to him. He heard the quiet gasp of the court, the shocked intake of breath from his advisor, the clatter of a servant dropping a tray in the far corner. An immortal king called uncle by a child in a simple apron. Yet on his tongue, for the first time in centuries, the future did not taste only of war and loneliness. "Something like that," he managed. The mark on her arm glowed warmer, as if in agreement. Echoes of old magic stirred in the stones under their feet. Alara choked on a sob. "Please," she whispered, "if you must punish someone, let it be me. She is only a child." Aurelius looked at her for a long, measured moment, then shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "there will be no punishment tonight." He turned, raising his voice just enough for the entire hall to hear. "By my word as king, Leora is under my protection. No one will harm her. No one will speak of her as a curse. She is blood of my blood, and anyone who forgets that will answer to me." The words rolled through the hall like a new law being carved into stone. Some faces showed relief, others fear, others silent calculation. Darian bowed his head, conflict warring behind his eyes, but loyalty winning, for now. Aurelius lowered his voice again, speaking only to the girl. "You and your mother will not sleep in the servants' quarters tonight," he said. "This castle is dangerous in ways you do not know. Old debts will wake with that mark. You will stay closer to me where I can see you." "Closer to you," she repeated, uncertain. He nodded once. "If I am what they fear," he said quietly, "then let that fear guard you." Leora studied his face for a moment, then did something that stole the breath from every person watching. She stepped out from behind the safety of his cloak and placed her small, burned hand trustingly into his. His cold fingers closed around hers almost on instinct. The mark between them flared, not painfully, but with a deep, resonant warmth that seemed to ripple through the air. Somewhere in the ancient stone, something answered, a distant tremor like a sleeping beast shifting in its lair. Carried on that unseen wave came a faint sound, so soft only Aurelius truly heard it. The echo of a voice he had not heard in a century, his brother's laughter caught in the memory of a half-forgotten summer. His composure cracked for a heartbeat. He tightened his grip gently so Leora would not see his hand tremble. Far above, thunder rumbled, though the sky outside was clear. The old wards of the castle, dormant for decades, shimmered to life at the edge of vampire senses, welcoming a lost bloodline, warning unseen enemies, rewriting silent rules. The advisor leaned close, whispering urgently, "My king, if the wards have awakened, something, or someone, has already sensed her. We may not be the only ones coming for this child." Aurelius looked down at Leora, at Alara, at the hall filled with eyes now chained to this unfolding fate. His mind raced through strategies, alliances, threats. But beneath all of it pulsed a new, terrifying resolve. He had failed to protect his brother. He would not fail this child. "Then let them come," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "For the first time in a long while, they will find something in this castle worth fighting for." As the last word left his lips, every candle in the hall flared higher, throwing long, trembling shadows up the walls. The mark on Leora's arm glowed once more, brighter than before, and then dimmed to a soft ember. She looked up at him with quiet certainty, as if she had made some decision of her own. "Uncle," she whispered, testing the word again, softer this time, "what happens to us now?" Aurelius held her gaze, ancient red eyes locked on the fragile, flickering hope in hers. Around them, the castle hummed with awakening magic, the first distant footsteps of approaching destiny echoing through unseen corridors. He did not answer, because for the first time in centuries, even the vampire king did not know what tomorrow would bring, only that whatever it was, he would not be facing it alone. And somewhere, deep in the labyrinth of stone beneath the castle, a pair of unseen eyes opened in the dark, drawn by the same blood-bound light now pulsing in a little girl's arm, and began to move toward the throne. The first sign that the night had changed came as a feeling, not a sound. Aurelius stood at the highest balcony of the castle with Leora beside him, her small hands curled around the cold stone railing. The sky above was deep and velvet dark, scattered with stars that had watched him grow from man to myth. For once, he did not look at them with the usual numbness. He watched Leora instead. She leaned forward, eyes wide as she took in the view. The sleeping village below, the thin line of river silvered by moonlight, the mountains standing like silent guardians in the distance. A soft breeze lifted strands of her hair, and she shivered. Without thinking, Aurelius unclasped the heavy velvet cloak from his shoulders and draped it around hers. It nearly swallowed her whole. She blinked up at him, surprised, then smiled in a way that made something in his chest ache and steady at the same time. "Thank you," she whispered. "It smells like old books." He almost laughed softly at the unexpected honesty of it. "I suppose that is better than blood," he said dryly. "I don't know what blood smells like," she admitted, shrinking a little. "Everyone says I shouldn't." "Everyone is right," Aurelius replied. "You are a child. You should know the scent of bread and rain and ink before you ever learn that one." She glanced sideways at him. "Do you remember those things?" He looked out over the dark land, remembering the first time he had run through rain as a boy, his brother Elian splashing beside him, both of them laughing as their clothes clung to their skin. He remembered the scent of bread from the village ovens when he used to walk among the people without a guard. He remembered staying up late reading, candlelight warming the pages. "Yes," he said slowly, "I remember. I have tried very hard not to, but I do." "Why would you try not to?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Because," he answered, "remembering what you have lost can be a crueler pain than simply feeling empty." Leora was quiet for a moment, then reached over and slipped her small hand into his. Her fingers were warm. The mark on her arm glowed faintly beneath the cloak, pulsing once like a heartbeat. "My teacher says pain means you're still alive," she murmured. "Maybe remembering means the same thing." Aurelius looked down at their joined hands. For so long, his existence had been a long corridor of duty and distance. But now there was this child speaking truths no one in his court would dare offer him. "Your teacher is wise," he said. "She's just the baker's wife," Leora replied. "She lets me sit near the oven when it's cold and tells me stories. She says stories are how we remember the parts of us that the world tries to make us forget." He felt those words settle deep inside him. Before he could answer, his body tensed. The air shifted. A thin, metallic taste slid over his tongue, a taste he knew too well. Old magic. He turned his head slightly, every sense sharpening. Below, at the far edge of the forest, a faint red shimmer appeared, running like a crack of light through the darkness. It moved along the invisible line of the outer wards, ancient protections bound to his blood. Since Leora's mark had awakened, those wards had begun to stir, but this was different. They were not just waking, they were reacting. Someone had touched them, someone who carried the same blood. Aurelius's hand tightened around Leora's. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. "Do not leave my side tonight no matter what you see." She nodded, sensing the change in his voice, and pressed closer. Below, the red shimmer grew stronger, then stilled, like a heartbeat that had found its rhythm again. Darian appeared at the balcony doorway, slightly out of breath. "My king," he said, "the sentries report movement at the eastern gate, one figure, cloaked. The wards did not reject them." "Of course they didn't," Aurelius murmured. His eyes remained fixed on the forest's edge. "They recognize their own." Darian hesitated. "Do you think it could be?" "I think," Aurelius replied, "that the past is walking toward us. Ready the inner guard, but keep their blades sheathed unless I say otherwise. If anyone strikes without my order, they will answer to me directly." Darian bowed, torn between worry and obedience. "As you command." He paused, glancing at Leora. "Should we take the child somewhere safe?" "No," Aurelius said immediately. "There is no safer place for her tonight than at my side." When they were alone again, Leora looked up at him, anxiety finally slipping into her eyes. "Is it bad?" she asked. "Who's coming?" He studied the shimmering wards one last time, listening, not with his ears, but with the part of him that remembered laughter on rainy days and promises made under starlight. "I don't know yet," Aurelius said, "but whoever it is, they are tied to us, to you, and to a mistake I have carried for far too long." He turned from the balcony. "Come, if this is what I think it is, I would rather meet it standing than hiding." They walked through the long corridors together, passing portraits of kings and queens with the same dark hair and fierce eyes. Leora glanced up at the paintings, then at him. "Do they all think they were monsters too?" she asked. He considered that. "Some of them were," he answered. "Some were just people given too much power and not enough kindness. Those two things rarely end well together." "And you," she pressed softly, "which one are you?" He did not look at her when he answered. "That, Leora, is what I am afraid we are about to find out." Down in the great hall, candles had been lit in full force. The room felt like a waiting heart, tense, expectant. Alara stood just inside the doors, wringing her hands, her eyes darting between the entrance and her daughter. When she saw Leora with the king's cloak around her shoulders and his hand firmly holding hers, something like relief and terror battled on her face. "Stay behind me," Alara whispered, reaching for her child. Aurelius looked at her steadily. "She will stand with both of us," he said softly. It was not a command, not entirely. It was a promise. Before Alara could reply, the outer doors of the castle groaned open. A hush fell over the hall. A single figure stepped inside, cloak dripping with night and forest dew. The hood was pulled low, but the moment they crossed the threshold, the ancient torches lining the walls flared higher, drawn to something in the stranger's presence. The wards in the stone hummed. The mark on Leora's arm burned hot, then settled into a steady, glowing warmth. The figure stopped a few paces from the throne, hands slowly lifting to lower the hood. Leora sucked in a breath. The man beneath was pale, but not with the stillness of death. His eyes glowed a softer red than Aurelius's, threaded with gold, like embers instead of flame. His hair, dark and loose, was shorter than in Aurelius's memories, but the line of his jaw, the crooked hint of a smile that hadn't fully formed yet, those were the same. So was the scar along his right temple. Aurelius remembered the night it was made, the wrong turn in a practice duel, the rush of fear that he had hurt his younger brother. "Hello, Aurelius," the man said, voice rough with distance and time. "You look terrible." In any other moment, the audacity of those words would have made the court gasp. Now, no one dared even breathe. "Elian," Aurelius managed, his voice lower than it had been in centuries. "You are supposed to be dead." Elian shrugged one shoulder like a boy caught sneaking in after curfew. "Yes, well, you were supposed to come looking for me," he replied. "We all break our promises, don't we?" The words landed like a quiet blow. Aurelius felt them all the way to the bones of his long, lonely centuries. Leora stared between them, her eyes wide, her mark glowing steadily. "Mama," she whispered, "that's him." Ilara choked on a sob, hand flying to her mouth. Elian's gaze finally shifted from his brother and landed on the small figure standing beside him. For a moment, the carefully fixed nonchalance on his face crumbled. He took a step forward. Leora's fingers tightened around Aurelius's hand. Elian stopped, eyes dipped to the faint red light beneath the king's cloak. His voice broke on a single word. "Leora." She gasped, "You know my name." "I named you," Elian said, the truth pouring out before he could stop it. "Your mother let me before I left. Leora, it means light. I wanted you to have something I had lost." Silence hung between them, so full it shook. "Where were you?" Aurelius finally asked, his tone softer than the accusation deserved. "All these years, why hide? Why let us think you were dead?" A shadow crossed Elian's face. "Because my death was easier to forgive than the truth," he answered. "The night the hunters came, I realized something. Our name, our crown, it had become a cage for us, for everyone around us. I was tired of being feared, tired of tasting guilt every time I fed. I thought if I disappeared, you could rule without my doubts hanging over you. And I could try to live without killing." He looked at Leora, emotion raw in his eyes. "I failed at that too. I fell in love with a human. I broke every law of our kind. I made a child that both worlds would call wrong. How could I bring that shame back to you?" Aurelius studied him, seeing the brother he had loved and the man he had become, woven together by fear and regret. "You thought I would kill her," Aurelius said quietly. Elian's jaw clenched. He didn't answer, he didn't have to. Leora looked between them, tears filling her eyes, not from fear, but from a child's deep, aching confusion. "So, you left because of me?" she asked Elian, voice trembling. "Because I was wrong." The question shattered him. Elian dropped to his knees right where he stood, cloak pooling around him on the cold stone. "No," he said hoarsely, shaking his head. "No, little light, I left because I was a coward, because I was afraid of what my brother would think, of what our people would say, of failing you before you even had a chance to live. You are not wrong, I am." Leora's lower lip trembled. She looked up at Aurelius, as if waiting to see whether she should run toward this man or away from him. The entire court watched the king, holding its breath. For the first time in centuries, Aurelius felt the full weight of who he was. Not just a ruler, not just a creature of the night, but a brother who had let fear build walls between him and everyone he loved. He realized, with a clarity that stole his breath, that this moment would define not only Leora's life, but his own as well. He could cling to his hurt, to his ego, to the loneliness that had become a familiar armor. Or he could do something harder. He could choose to forgive. Very slowly, Aurelius released Leora's hand. She looked up, startled. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but steady. "Leora," he said, "this man is your father, he is also my brother, which means that whatever mistakes he has made, whatever mistakes I have made, we are bound, by blood, by choice, if we are brave enough." Elian lifted his gaze to Aurelius, disbelief and hope warring in his eyes. "You abandoned your family," Aurelius continued, not hiding the pain. "You left me to grieve you. You left your child without a father. I will not pretend that was anything but wrong." Elian flinched. "But," Aurelius added, and the word cut through the hall like a clean blade, "I have done my own abandoning. I have turned my back on everyone who tried to care for me. I have ruled through fear, letting it shape me more than love ever did. If you were a coward for running, then I have been a coward for standing still." He stepped down from the throne, each movement slow and deliberate. Ilara watched, tears streaking down her cheeks. Darian and the guards held their positions, hands far from their hilts. Aurelius stopped just in front of his kneeling brother. "For a long time I have believed that monsters cannot change," he said quietly. "That once the world names you one, your only choice is to become better at pretending you don't care." His eyes softened. "This child has made me doubt that." He extended a hand. Not the hand of a king to a subject. The hand of an older brother to the younger one he had thought lost. Elian stared at it, breathing hard. You would still, after everything. I am not forgiving you for the man you were, Aurelius said. I am choosing you for the man you can still become, for her sake and for mine. Leora's breath came out in a small, shuddering sound. She stepped forward, caught between them, her glowing mark casting soft red light over their faces. If you both feel bad, she whispered, maybe you could feel bad together, and then maybe it won't feel so heavy. There was a rough, choked sound, half laugh, half sob from Elian's throat. Out of the mouths of children, Aurelius murmured. Slowly, Elian reached up and took his brother's hand. The moment their fingers closed, the entire castle shuddered. The wards flared bright red, then settled into a steady, protective glow. The portraits along the walls seemed almost to exhale. The mark on Leora's arm flamed, then softened, no longer burning but shining with a warm, steady light. Magic, old and wild, rippled invisibly through the stone, through the air, through every quiet corner of the kingdom. A bloodline once cracked and bleeding had begun to mend. You feel that? Elian asked, voice hushed. Yes, Aurelius answered. The castle remembers us, all of us, it has been waiting. He turned to the court, still holding Elian's hand, Leora standing between them like a bridge built of flesh and hope. Listen carefully, Aurelius said, his voice suddenly filling the hall with a new kind of power. Tonight you have seen the truth our enemies will soon learn as well. The blood of this house is not broken, it is not cursed, it is alive. He glanced at Leora, then back at his people. You have heard tales of my cruelty, of my distance. Many of them are true. I will not rewrite my past, but I will rewrite our future. From this night on, strength in this castle will not be measured only in fear and steel, but in who we choose to protect. This child, Leora, is under my protection, under my brother's protection, and if any of you still have hearts, under yours as well. A murmur rose, not of dissent, but of something stranger, cautious hope. Darian stepped forward, went down on one knee and bowed his head. My king, he said, my loyalty was always to the throne. Tonight I offer it also to the family that sits upon it. I will lay down my life for the child. One by one, like falling dominoes of courage, others followed, guards, servants, even the stern advisor. They knelt not just to a king feared in stories, but to a family choosing a different way to exist. Ilara sank to her knees, overcome, clutching her hands to her chest. Her eyes shone with gratitude too big for words. Leora watched them, her small face caught between awe and disbelief. Are they bowing for us? She whispered. They are bowing for what you represent, Aurelius replied softly. A chance to be better than what we were. Elian looked at him, eyes wet. I don't deserve this, he said. Neither do I, Aurelius answered. That is not the point, she does. Later, when the hall had quieted and the formalities were done, they stood together in a smaller chamber lit by a gentle fire. The heat painted gold over stone and shadow. Leora sat in a cushioned chair far too big for her, Aurelius's cloak still wrapped around her like a warm storm cloud. Ilara hovered nearby, torn between giving them space and not wanting to let her daughter out of reach. Elian sat on the floor at Leora's feet, looking up at her as if memorizing every line of her face. His eyes were red, not from blood, but from crying. I used to make up stories about you, he said quietly. When you were still in your mother's belly, I told Ilara you would be braver than I was, kinder than we were taught to be. I thought you would grow up human, safe, that no one would ever need to know my blood was in you, he swallowed. I never imagined this. She studied him carefully. Are you going to disappear again? She asked, blunt in the way only children can be. Elian closed his eyes. No, he said, voice firm. I have spent too long running from the people I love. If you will let me, I would like to stay, to know you, to earn the right to be your father. Leora looked at Aurelius, as if asking whether it was safe to believe him. Aurelius met her gaze. People make terrible choices when they are afraid, he said. Your father has. What matters is what they do when given a second chance. He looked at Elian, something like a weary smile ghosting over his face. Do not waste it, he added quietly. She is worth more than your fear. Leora searched both their faces, then gave a small nod. You can stay, she told Elian, "but if you leave again, I will ask Uncle to bite you." Elian blinked. That seems extreme. She frowned in thought. Fine, then I'll bite you. Aurelius actually laughed, a low, startled sound he had not heard from his own throat in a lifetime. Ilara covered her mouth, shoulders shaking with soft, disbelieving laughter of her own. The tension broke like a thin shell around them, letting something gentler through. Elian reached up, brushing a stray hair from Leora's forehead. "Deal," he said. "I would rather face 100 hunters than you angry with me." She leaned forward and hugged him, small arms wrapping around his neck. He froze for a heartbeat, then clung to her as if she were the only solid thing in the world. Aurelius watched them, standing in the flickering firelight. For once, the ache in his chest did not feel like emptiness. It felt like old scars being stretched by new growth, painful but alive. Ilara stepped up beside him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for choosing her, for choosing them." He shook his head. "Do not thank me yet. There will be consequences. The other clans will come. Hunters may gather. This peace may cost more than any of us expect." Ilara's voice steadied. "Then at least we will pay that price for something that matters." He looked at her, truly looked, seeing not just a servant, but a woman who had survived fear and raised a child under the shadow of his castle, because there was nowhere else to go. "You have more courage than many nobles I have knighted," he said. "If you ever wish to leave this place, to take your daughter and live far from the politics of blood, say the word. I will see you safely there." She shook her head slowly. "With respect, Your Majesty, until tonight this castle was only a place we tried to survive. For the first time it feels like it could be a home. I would rather stay and help you make it one, if you will have us." Aurelius felt something settle inside him. "Then stay," he said, "both of you, all of you." Leora's voice piped up from the chair. "Uncle." He turned, "Yes." "Are you," she hesitated, searching for the right word, "happy?" The question caught him off guard. Happiness was not a feeling he had allowed himself to consider in a very long time. He thought of the weight of his crown, the risks ahead, the storms surely coming. He also thought of the warmth of a small hand in his, the sound of his brothers breathing not in memory, but in this room, the tiny heartbeat of hope inside a child who bore the mark of his line. "I am," he paused, tasting the word, "I am less alone than I have been in centuries, and that feels close to happiness." Leora smiled, satisfied. "Then," she said firmly, "I think the stories about you were wrong." He raised a brow. "Which stories?" "The ones that say you have no heart," she replied. "You do, it's just very quiet, like the castle at night." For the first time, Aurelius did not flinch at being compared to his own fortress. He glanced around at the stone walls, the dancing firelight, the faces turned toward each other instead of away. "Perhaps," he said softly, "it is finally waking up." Outside, the night deepened. In distant forests and hidden lairs, enemies and allies felt the subtle shift in the kingdom's magic and stirred uneasily. Some would come seeking weakness. Some would come seeking war. They would find neither. They would find a vampire king who had remembered what it meant to care, a lost brother who had stopped running, a human mother who refused to bow to fear, and at the center of it all, a little girl with a glowing mark on her arm and enough courage to ask the questions no one else dared. In the quiet of that fragile, powerful peace, Aurelius made a silent vow, not as a king, not as a legend, but as a man. Whatever came, he would face it not with emptiness, but with the family he had been given, late and imperfect and miraculous. For the first time since he had taken the throne, the future no longer looked like an endless night. It looked faintly like dawn,